Finch, and I am co-chair for the ACAP Cape Fear chapter. We're glad that everybody's here tonight and joining us online as well. We are especially happy to have any folks that are with us for the first time, and you will find information on each table where you're seated. There's a small card that if you would like to be part of our mailing list, if you fill out that information and share it with us. And then also on your table will be feedback forms for today's program. We'll visit those again at the end. And then the table here at the front, there's lots of information, resource materials available. There's also the ACAP Cape Fear Educational Program calendar for the next 5 months. Our program's outlined there with the speakers identified. So please make sure that you grab one of those on your way out the door this evening. So tonight we're happy to have with us our sponsor is Assistance for Life, and I'd like to introduce Nikki Zeldin to come talk to us about Assistance for Life.
Thanks, Ruth. Hello, everyone. I'm Nikki Zeldin, as she said, from Assistance for Life Care Management Services. We're a local private care management company. We basically do coordination and oversight of care and advocacy. We meet clients privately, either in their home or in a facility, and assess 5 areas: their home, health, support network, and then financial and legal. In those cases, we just ask broad questions. And one of the things we do is refer people to local resources and connect them. And there are other organizations in the community who do that. What makes us different is that we actually offer the assistance to kind of hold a client's hand through the navigation of doctor's appointments and even things like working with home care agencies in the house. And so we also have, right now it's on pause, but a driving fitness program, which is an occupational therapy clinical evaluation to determine a person's fitness to drive. And that program is in partnership with Southeastern Driver Training Center, and they offer actually the behind the wheel testing. So we're in the process of hiring a new occupational therapist to work in our clinic, but be on the lookout for more information about that program. We're happy to sponsor tonight, especially since our speaker is my other half, Andrew Zeldin, and here he is.
Great. Thank you, Nikki, so much for sponsoring this evening. So Andrew Zeldin is with us tonight, and Andrew has been working to better the lives of older adults since 2011. When he embarked on his journey to become a professional in the field of aging. He has a master's degree in gerontology from UNCW, a graduate certificate in geriatric care management from University of Florida, and a BA in history from UNCW. You like UNCW. After graduate school, Andrew took a position with UNCW gerontology department as a lecturer and started his own care management practice, Assistance for Life. Over the next few years, Andrew worked to build relationships with local professionals and organizations while working as an advocate and a teacher. He gained a deeper understanding of how to help older adults by connecting them with local resources and services. In May of 2016, Andrew accepted a position with the New Hanover County Senior Resource Center as a social work supervisor and life enrichment program director. He's fabulous at that. He's very involved in the community. I think some of his things were up on the screen earlier about his involvement in the community, but he is clearly dedicated to working with older adults and their families and believes that educating young adults on aging issues will benefit the local community and society as a whole. He's married to Nikki, who is now running their business with a partner, Noah Alper, the care management practice that Andrew founded, Assistance for Life Care Management Services. They are tonight's program sponsor, and Andrew and Nikki have 3 children, Sophie, Edie, and Jacob. So we're happy to have Andrew with us tonight, talking about home is where the heart is, residential options as we age. Andrew?
Thank you. Set this here. Put this one here. And I just want to test to make sure I'm doing that right. Okay, good. So thank you for having me. And I must give Nikki and Assistance for Life Care Management Services a plug because it's much better under her and Noah Alper's leadership than it was under mine. I just kind of had the dream and they took it to the next level. So I wanted to tell you a little bit. So I oversee the life enrichment program at the Senior Resource Center. And it's like the health and human service arm of the Resource Center. Oh, thank you. And through that program, we oversee the home delivered meal program. A lot of people know it as Meals on Wheels. We have over 600 clients on that program. We have a family caregiver support program, which we provide caregiver support groups, education. We do respite, both in-home and community respite through places like Elder House. We have a licensed clinical therapy program where we're probably the only center in the actual state of North Carolina that has free licensed clinical therapy for older adults, not only to where they could come into the center, but we go into the home. We also have under my team a prescription drug assistance program where we help people with prescription assistance. And then we have a Medicare counseling program called SHIP, the Senior Health Insurance Information Program, where we do free Medicare counseling for older adults. And we only really have a part-time person. Most of our volunteers who are certified are most people are certified are volunteers. And I always joke around, I don't know who would ever want to volunteer to do Medicare counseling, but these are some amazing people. But another thing we do, and this is kind of getting to the point of home is where the heart is, residential options as we age, is we always have a social worker on site to do information and assistance and information and referral. And one of the things that we see all the time at the Senior Resource Center is people coming in needing information about housing, whether it be affordable housing, whether it be they're just moving to the area and they want to know what options are available, rentals, independent living facilities. And we'll talk more about this as we go on, but it's a big issue that we see all the time. And then next, I also, one of the things that I do at the Senior Center is the county adapted the first ever 5-year strategic master aging plan. And I was lucky to get to help oversee that plan for New Hanover County. And when we did the community needs assessment, it was during COVID, during the pandemic, so we didn't have as much turnout as we want. But in the community needs assessment portion, we had about 1,200 people take part in that. And the number one issue that came up was housing. And it wasn't just affordable housing, it was about housing options. A lot of older adults and even younger older adults, where am I going to live later on in life? So it really, what I do ties into this. I will tell you now, I am not an expert on housing. There's probably a lot that I'm going to leave off the table here, but I'm going to do my best because I have been in that senior center role. I haven't been in that care management role for a while, but I'm going to do my best. So let's go ahead and talk about some of these learning outcomes for today. And I know I sound poised and confident in the beginning, but I'll probably be all over the place for the rest of this presentation. So bear with me. So the first thing is just, we're going to talk about an array of housing options and services available to people as they age. And we'll kind of talk about this a lot, the phrase aging in place, but we're going to talk about the different options because I think that's changed from what maybe aging in place used to mean. Strategies and resources for evaluating and choosing housing options and services. I could point to Nikki and Assistance for Life Care Management. I saw, I think it's the Senior Connections. There's different options for how you do that, even friends and family. So we'll talk about all those options. And then just the concept of aging in place. I just touched on it a little bit, but aging in place could be done a lot of ways, and it could be done in different areas. It doesn't always necessarily have to be in your traditional home, because I think now we don't have so many people living in just the traditional home that they used to live in all their life. It doesn't kind of work that way anymore. So I wanted to start off at the top, and we'll get into this, but there's a bunch of different living situations, living at the home, living with support, We have nowadays, especially in our area in New Hanover, Brunswick County, we have a lot of these over 55 independent living communities. Actually, my parents about 2 years ago moved up from Florida to move into Compass Point. They sold their house and bought a townhome there. Continuing care retirement communities, assisted living facilities, skilled nursing facilities. And then I have this outside the box here, and I'll get into that more, but I think there's a lot of options that we have to think about as we get older, of different options where it could live, more affordable options. And we'll get into that. I want to save that. So let me flip my notes here so I don't go all over the place. So my next slide is aging in place. Now I have this quote on here. If anyone in this room could guess who said this quote, and this is going to be really hard. This is like a Jeopardy question. This would be $1,000 question. I'll buy you one of those $2 lottery tickets and send it to you. It ain't where you from, it's where you at. And I'll give you even a hint. It's from the hip hop genre.
Is it like Snoop Dogg or something?
That's close. It's more 80s. Well, it's Eric B. and Rakim. And but this, and no one would probably know that, but this quote always made me think. And when we talk in age in place, like just in here, what does aging in place mean to someone in here? Anyone want to say what it means to you?
Staying in your home as long as you can.
Staying in your home as long as you can.
Staying in the place of my choosing.
Staying in the place of your choosing. Great. Anybody else?
Just somewhere where you have to make modifications to, you know, the living environment.
Yeah. Yeah, I wrote down, and those were all great. You know, the ability to live in one's home and community independently, safely and comfortably as we age, you know, regardless of income, ability, and age. And I kind of think of that as making the most of where you're at. Like when I was a care manager, and I truly mean this, and I'm going to say I have a bias to people staying in the home. Nothing against, I'm going to talk about CCRCs, which I think are great, assisted living, nursing home, all this other stuff. But I always came from this background of my mom. I grew up living with my grandma. We made sure my grandma lived in a home as long as she possibly could, because that's where she wanted to be. Now, again, things are different and it's individual for each person, right? But I definitely think you could, if you have to use a walker in your home, you could have a great quality of life if you use the walker. You know, there's nothing wrong with having to use those modifications in your home. So I think aging in place, it's different now, and we'll kind of get into this with the next slide, because not everybody could live in a traditional home. So I have some ideas on this slide for just, we're going to first talk about kind of that residential option. Then we're going to talk about more, you know, I guess, organizations and facilities and things like that. And you'll notice there's some things missing from my slides as I thought of them after the fact. So I will add them maybe to the slides to send them out. But so home is where the heart is. So first I had single family owner occupied homes. That's your traditional homes, right? And we'll get into this in a second of how we could kind of age place in these homes. Multi-family units. Anybody know what I'm talking about there with the multi-family units? You know, you have multiple homes, condos, and buildings. You know, we even have, they're rentals, but we have the senior housing here in Wilmington, which, and we'll get into this too, you know, senior housing is great. It's affordable. We have actually a lot of senior housing, but we also have a lot of older adults in our demographics. So there's a lot of waiting lists there. Co-housing, we don't really have that here. It's like a kind of new age catchphrase, you know, co-housing. You could co-house. A lot of older adults could co-house. In places like Colorado's and bigger cities, they have more communities that do some co-housing. At the senior center, we have a couple of groups of people who I know, like we had one lady who lost her husband. She owned this house. So she got 3 roommates. And so they have 3 roommates or 4 roommates. They split the bills. They are there to support each other. They have friendship. some of them at one point didn't drive. They take care of each other. And it's been a great thing for a long time for that group. Another lady did it too, and she was wonderful, but eventually she passed away, and then that kind of group disbanded. But that's another option. You have subsidized rental public housing, Section 8. You have landlords, and you have these older adults in our community that live in a lot of these types of places. We have a very diverse community here in Wilmington. Like in terms of discretionary income, you have older adults who have a lot of money, and then you have some older adults who don't have a lot of money. And it's interesting, at the senior center, none of our programs are based on income. I think a lot of people seem to think that. They think, oh, it's an entitlement program, but it's not like that. Our funding comes from the Older American Act, the Home Community Care Block Grant, trickles down from federal to state. And I just realized I'm getting way off tangent here, so I'm going to stop. But my point is, I was going to start to go in a whole senior center lecture there. But also, this is where I wanted to get into the outside the box. And so what would maybe some other places in the community where older adults would live, where they could kind of age in place, would you think?
Are there family care homes in this area?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of these assisted living, and there are some family care homes.
Like somebody buys a ranch home and converts it into a home for
Yeah.
Seniors.
Not a lot of independent, but there are a few in the area. I was thinking more, and we're going to get into that. It's great that you brought that up. I was thinking more like a parent living with one of their adult children in the home. Or, you have one of these little small, what do they call them? The 80s accessory dwelling units. Thank you, Don. I knew Don would be my subject matter expert there. Yeah. But you see a lot more of that. And now in the state of North Carolina, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it used to be a lot harder to put those in our community. But now with some new laws and regulations, it's much more accessible to do that.
County and City of Wilmington is making it very less stringent.
Yes.
To build one. And it's wonderful.
Yeah, it really is. And you see that. I've noticed that a lot more recently in our area, which is great.
What are they?
An ADU, accessory dwelling unit.
It's like little mother-in-law homes, like a little house behind the house.
It can be 30% of the building, of the structure, the main structure square footage. And you have to have the setbacks from the property lines, all that. But it can be done very easily, and then you have a rental income forever.
Don, what's it called again?
ADU, accessory dwelling unit. It's in the code.
Yeah. Yes, that's great. I'm glad when I would be teaching my class, I would have had that term on my head, but it's after work. It's not there anymore, but that's great. But it's really, it's becoming more and more common. And this is me going off on another tangent, but my cousin who's in St. Pete, he does a lot of stuff for like re-entry for prisoners who get out of, jail and they have to get back in the community. And they've built a lot of these little accessory dwelling units in St. Pete area so they can kind of be in the middle of town near grocery stores, but it's affordable. And so that's kind of the same idea with these, with aging in place for parents. I also had, in terms of outside the box, and this is kind of more European, but, older adults living with younger people, like college students. That is a big thing in like Amsterdam or the Netherlands, Sweden, and places like that. And you don't see it as much here, but it's starting to become a thing where I have seen some people. One of the things in my dream, and I'm giving you the ability to steal it now, you're going to make a lot of money. You know how they have these dating apps where people, I wouldn't know, Nikki, they swipe right or left or anything like that. But, I'm talking to people and I'm trying to push people. Why can't we have a site like that connects older adults who are looking for a roommate, who are looking to connect to someone? I mean, think of all the benefits of socialization, having a partner to help bring down costs. And I'll talk about this a little bit more here. I mean, it's something that a lot of people move here and they don't have as many family and friends as they used to because they're all geographically distributed all over the place. So those were some outside the box places. Now, before I get back to that, how to age in place, this is like my social determinants of health right here. And all these things here, I feel like are cross-cutting. You know, you can't they all kind of touch each other. Like housing, you know, will you be comfortable, safe in your home? You know, this is important. You know, I see a lot of older adults, there's holes in the roof. You know, there's bugs, you know, that these cost money. Health and wellness, will you have access to health care that you need? Now, I could go a bunch of different places here. We just got a new hospital, right? You hear all kinds of people saying stuff, but I can remember when my dad moved here, it took him months to get a doctor. You know, sometimes to get to an appointment, it takes months to get an appointment. Transportation, that kind of leaks into that. You know, transportation, you know, if you can't get to your doctor's appointment if you don't have transportation, you know, so all these things, and I'll keep it going, are going to affect your ability to age in place. Transportation, does anyone use our WAVE, our local bus line here? You know, I used to use it a lot when I was younger because when I was a student, it was free. So I used it to go all over the place. But now I'm more aware that their routes only cover certain parts of our area in New Hanover County. In Brunswick County, they don't even really have a real good public transportation system. So for some of these older adults who can't get around, you know, they're going to have to use, you know, a professional service to get them there. And these could be quite costly, which we'll get into. Personal finance, and this kind of, all these things are affecting everything. You know, it's hard to age in place if you don't have the finances to do so. And we'll talk about some of these things, whether it's paying for home care, paying for food, paying bills. I mean, that stuff could add up, and some people start picking one or the other. And then connection and growth. And I think about my friend Z, who I know she won't mind me saying, she's probably, what do you say, in her 90s, Nikki? When she was telling me the story, she lives in this neighborhood. It's kind of like off of like Wrightsville Ave somewhere. When they moved there, you know, she was in her 30s and she had kids and they had all these friends. Well, now 60 years later, all of these friends are gone. Her people aren't there. So all these supports she grew up with her whole life, they're gone. And so that's tough when you don't have that. So in order to age in place, my next slide I have is, you know, options. And so I would start with informal supports. And this is a big thing everywhere, not just here, but informal supports. You have friends, family. You have your churches, your synagogues. You know, like at my synagogue, we have a lot of older adults. We have an older congregation. So we do a lot of things, like we bring them food when they get sick. During the holidays, we're always bringing them food or giving them drives to services, you know. But that's important. Like, this is a big way a lot of people age in place in our community and other communities. You need these people. Then we have our formal supports. And through this group, we have a bunch of great organizations who are formal supports. You know, we have home care. We have programs like PACE, the Program of All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly, which helps people actually stay in home and age in place. You have in-home aid services. You have physical therapy, occupational therapy. Probably the one I have on here is we have the Senior Resource Center. And how would you say? Well, one of the ways we have is we have the home delivered meal program. And this is huge. You think, well, you're just bringing them a meal 5 days a week. But we have a saying that, you know, the home delivered meal program, it's more than just a meal. You have these volunteers that come, they get to know these people, and they end up doing a lot more than they're supposed to. They're supposed to come, talk to the person, bring them some food, and that's that. Well, I have people who are basically putting in toilets for people. They're going shopping for people. But today is a perfect example. This one lady called. She was a volunteer. And she said, hey, I brought the food over to Miss So-and-so. And she wasn't there, but I left it. And they know they're not supposed to leave the food because they tell us that the person isn't there. Then we could check with the person. We could check with their emergency contact, and we could try to figure it out. But she kind of felt, she knew that wasn't the right protocol. So she called me. She was like, something's not right, And so I said, well, hey, let me do this, besides reprimanding her for not, leaving the food there. I said, let me try to call the son. We'll call the son, see if he could go check on her. And sure enough, the son went and checked on her, and she had a fall. But imagine if no one checked on her, and she lied there all day today and all night. And then next thing you know, who knows what happens. So programs like that are great. We also have other programs within the senior center. And it's not just our senior center, throughout all over the country. I guess I am going to just talk about this for a second. So there's this Older Americans Act, it came back out in like 65, when Medicare and all these things came out. And so this is money dedicated to aging services. And it's passed down from state to state. So I'm just going to talk about us. We have the Division of Aging and Adult Services for North Carolina under the Division of Health and Human Services. So they basically distribute this money, this pot of money, to all these area agency on aging throughout North Carolina. So ours is Region O. It's Columbus, Brunswick, Pender, and New Hanover County. And they have this money, and there's like a formula of how that money's broken down, but they give it to these centers or agencies that represent their aging services for that county, and they determine how to use it. So we use ours for like medical transportation, home delivered meals, congregate food where people could come into the senior center and get food, senior center services, my social workers. And then another thing is the in-home aid service program we have that it's a great program and it keeps people in the home. The problem is we have only 20-something people in the program. We have about 100-something people on the waiting list because the people who are on the program, they stay in their home because they have aides coming 4 to 5 days a week, And I kind of got off topic there, but I really did want you to know that because I think wherever you're at and whoever's hearing this, you want to talk to your local aging services because they may be connected to connect you to just if you need a home care company or if you need a geriatric care manager or if you need a place for someone to go to an adult day center. And so they also may be able to access resources, whether it's from the VA or anybody else, they could connect you. So I think that's important for people to know when you're talking about housing or how to age in place. You want to utilize every resource you can. Like even within this, I didn't talk about there's a CAP program. It's the Community Alternatives Program, where you could, through Medicaid, you could get services in the home to help you stay in the home. And there's a lot more, but I don't want to keep going there. Another thing to age in place, home modifications. That's huge. Everybody knows. So my dad's going to kill me that I keep talking about him on here. But when my dad moved here, he was here for 6 months, probably 2 weeks after my mom retired at 71, my dad had a stroke. So you can imagine my mom's like, I worked 71 years and he's going to have a stroke on me. But, we had to go into action. And even though they got a house that was kind of more age-friendly, home modified, there were certain things they didn't because they weren't thinking. We'll kind of get into this too about, everybody wants to have their house look good. Like, they want to have that big trip hazard rug in the house, even though you could fall and break your neck. And my mom had it in her kitchen the other day. I was like, this is ridiculous, even though they admitted tripping on it. But that's what people have. Well, they didn't have grab bars. So one of the things that helped my dad, because he couldn't walk, he had to learn how to walk again, is we got grab bars for the showers. We got a railing so he could walk down the steps. And that's a way to age in place. Other people, they may have to build a ramp, to get out if they're in a wheelchair or even using a walker. Even, thresholds on floors. We've had some people who we've had to do stuff, and we don't have a lot of money for this. And there's not a lot of money for this for home modifications. It depends on where you're from and how different people spend their money. Like Brunswick County uses their money a little bit more for home modifications, especially for family caregivers. We just started to this year for the first time, but we had one person who, because of his rollator, he couldn't get over those thresholds. So we got this nice veteran handyman guy got these little mini ramps to go over the thresholds to make it easier so he wouldn't catch. And just something simple like that is preventing him from the fall. Walk-in showers. I mean, gosh, I'm thinking about me taking a shower now, and I have some issues stepping over and tripping. And when you're older, you may be in your 80s and you can't get your leg up aside. It's nice to just walk into the shower, especially even if you have to sit down and take a shower and you have a shower chair. So there's a lot of modifications. And then finally, technology. And it seems like I'm going to talk about aging in place in the home and stuff for a long time, and I'll zip through the other stuff, but I'll try not to. I'll try to be quick. How am I doing on time? Okay. You just give me the hook whenever you need to cut me off, Nikki. Last thing is technology. And I think this is, it's a catch-22 because some people really love the idea of technology. You can imagine some of our older adults don't like technology. But if you think about it, like my mom's a baby boomer. She's now 72, 73. My mom knows a lot about technology. My mom probably knows more about technology than I do. I could say she truly does. And Nikki can attest to that. But there's a lot of great things out there. Like you have personal emergency response systems. Like if you don't have anyone in town, and a lot of people hate that because they've seen the commercials for so many years, that age, I've fallen and I can't get up. A lot of older adults don't want to work, but those are lifesavers, right? Especially if you don't have anybody. And now they're so fancy. I mean, you could literally talk to people through them. There's what else did I have in here? Medication management systems, because so many people have these medications. And I'm not a big fan of those because I think they can mess up a lot. I think I'd rather have them prepped up, but still there's that ability. There's these smart houses like Alexa. There's all these things that can make your life so much easier now. And it's pretty incredible. Even like, the clap on, clap off. I mean, that's a pretty incredible thing instead of leaning over. I mean, I can't tell you how many times when I used to, and I still do it now when I go to people's homes for an assessment and I see them do things where you're going, don't trip over that, or don't lean over, or don't, go down to pick something up. There's a lot of risk. And so there's a lot of things we could do to age in place in the home. Any questions so far?
What does the PACE program stand for?
So the program of all-inclusive care for the elderly, and Ruth is from Elder House, which they are our PACE program here. Do you want to say something about that, Ruth?
Yes, so PACE is kind of like your insurance program as well as your primary care provider. So, and it includes everything from home modifications that we just talked about, or implanting technology in the home, but we kind of partner with the family to keep that person at home as long as possible and out of the nursing home. So we deploy home care into the home to help them with bathing and dressing. We have the day center that they come to for activities or events. They can come 1 day a week, 5 days a week, whatever the family feels like they need. We have folks that they bring their spouse every morning because they still go to work. And so they're there in attendance every day. But we also have a full clinic, a full pharmacy, and a full therapy department all in-house, as well as licensed clinical social workers if they need that kind of assistance too. So it's whatever they need. The reason it's all-inclusive care is whatever the interdisciplinary team needs daily, and if they decide that they need a ramp put in the house, then we call and we're putting a ramp in the house.
Yeah.
To make sure that the safety's there and they have what they need to be fully functioning at home. If we need to get Meals on Wheels in the home, or we prep meals and send them home with them, whatever works for them, or if we need to buy a microwave so they can, if they're still capable to microwave their own food, the dietitian would assess all that, and we could get the microwave to go in the house. So not many insurance providers will be as responsive as the PACE program is, and is what makes it so successful, because we have very low hospitalization rate, very low falls. If one of our folks falls in the home, like if your mom had fallen over the rug and she was a PACE participant, OT and PT would be at the house, if not that day, the next day. And the nurse would be there too, assessing her and then helping troubleshoot what happened in the house that caused the fall.
And where are you located?
We have, our PACE center is on North College, just across from Grace Baptist Church. They have a school there.
Yeah, because it's new.
It is new. We moved, we were across from the hospital for a number of years, but we have the home care there. It used to be a school there, so it's, there's a gymnasium there. The home care is in that building. And then we have the adult day health program over at Greenfield Lake. And that is just, they go there for the day for daycare or day help if they have to pass meds or check blood glucose. But then they go home every night. And it's a lovely little place. Those are the
It is.
happiest people because they get to go home every day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, oh, that was okay.
What was the name of it? Oh, Elder House?
Elder House. And I could say before I move on, that I have a bias because I did my clinical in the Elder House back in like 2009 and 10. But I also kind of helped form my holistic approach to providing care for older adults because they had this interdisciplinary team approach. And I thought it was the best method of how to help create the best quality of life for people. So it's really good. But, you know, like all these programs, some you got to qualify for. In Elder House, you know, it's mostly through Medicaid. You could pay privately. And throughout a lot of this stuff, and this is what I'm going to get into, even with all these programs that I told you about, these options, sometimes that's not enough. And you have to kind of make a decision or go somewhere else. And I wrote on here, and I talked about it earlier, but as you get older, and if you're in a place like this, there are also, like I said, you don't have as many informal supports. Here in this area, it happens all the time. Older adults move here, and as soon as they move here, they're ready to celebrate the life and have the greatest life of their life, greatest time of their life, and something happens. And no, they have no one. The wife has no one. The husband has no one. And so it's easy to say, hey, we want to age in place, but sometimes you have to think, about or you have to consider other options. So my next part is kind of considering, when you might consider maybe not necessarily not aging in place, but relocating. And, I had a couple things in here. Home ownership becomes a burden. And, that could be hard, keeping up with the lawn, keeping up with the repairs, the painting. I mean, I'm terrible and can't keep up with it now. So I imagine as you get older, it's tougher. On here, also desire to engage, I think back to Z and engage in other activities and socialization. When you lose your neighborhood, you lose your system and there's no one else, you may want to be around people your own age. You want to maybe have opportunities, but you don't have it because you don't drive anymore. So you want to maybe in a place like an independent facility or an assisted living facility. And then finally, safety, safety concerns. And I have on here, personal and general. I even think about during hurricanes. So another thing that we used to do, now we don't. We used to oversee the special needs registry at the senior center. Now it's called the Access and Functional Needs Registry, but it was for a lot of mostly older adults. There were some people 18 and older too with developmental disabilities who didn't have really any support during the hurricanes or something like that. And they could be on the list, and we would try to make sure they had a plan in place. But, when you're in a really old home that doesn't, it's not built the best way and storms are coming, it's not the safest place for you to be. And so that's something to worry about. Some other things just to keep on moving. Maybe when you think it's time to make a change, we talked about managing household, the isolation and depression. I happen to work at a senior center. I know a lot of older adults who are living alone and they're isolated and depressed. And it's not to say that everybody, there's plenty of people, I could tell you this for a fact, they don't want to live at a place with a bunch of other older adults. They don't want to do that. They want to stay in the home. They want to be by themselves. Even if no one's going to help them, that's what they want to do. But a lot of people do. Some of these other things like trouble keeping up with personal care, like even, to be real, having to wipe yourself or take showers to clean yourself, you kind of notice things aren't working as well, your mind, your body, medication management, that's a hard thing when you're taking my dad has like 13 pills, I don't know how he keeps up with it 3 times a day, but he has his little system, but it's harder and harder to keep up with. So these are some reasons. And then how do you determine that a little bit more? And this kind of goes, this is important. And this is something that I think some older adults, they know where they're at. Like, if you have trouble walking, if you have trouble getting in the shower or driving, but there's 2 different ways that kind of tell when people assess. There's the instrumental activities of daily living. And that's like you see on here, cooking, managing finances, cleaning, driving. Like these are things that make up the independence of a person. Like driving, who here, when you can't drive anymore, like that's it for a lot of people. It just guts them. And, so that's important. If you can't drive, then you're limited on what you could do unless you're going to use some of these services. And then when you kind of get to the activities of daily living, dressing, grooming, toiling, bathing, eating, like if you're having trouble with these things, then that may be a time for move too. Of course, like I go back to, and I see Jen there, if you want to stay in the home, you could have someone come in your home and help you stay in the home. And that's wonderful. Either way, these things though are going to potentially cost money, whether you stay in the home or if you go to one of these places we're about to talk about. And that's something you'll have to weigh. And we'll talk about it. I'm going to keep on going because I know I'm running out of time. So I'm going to go through these places, the different places you can live. One is independent facilities. Again, I kind of touched on it, but I wrote it down here. Money for all these places could be an option, right? Because look at it. I wrote all about the amenities. You got on-site dining. You got transportation. You got activities. You have movie nights. There's a lot going on there. Then you have like upgrades. Like say a lot of our independent facilities here, like if you want to stay independent, you could maybe get someone like a home care person come in to aid to help you stay independent. And that's a great thing because they want to stay with their crew, with their friends, but that does cost a lot of money. The next one is assisted living. In assisted living, it kind of talks about, you need helps with maybe activity of daily living. You have 24-hour supervision and care. But one of the things that I wanted to touch on is a lot of people come into the senior center and go, so how do you pay for this? Doesn't Medicare pay for this? People say that all the time. Doesn't Medicare pay for this? And no, and they go, no, I see somewhere in there that, and it doesn't. And a lot of people even think like when you talk about long-term care Medicaid, and for someone who's maybe new to this conversation, this may be a little over your head, but of course you could always come back and ask questions. And I'm sure there's a lot of people in this group with this knowledge too, but with assisted living, which is kind of the one step above nursing, nursing homes, long-term Medicaid doesn't necessarily cover that either. There's like a whole different version of, I think it's special assistance. And again, this is above my pay grade. I shouldn't even be talking about this, but it is very complicated. And so, when mom or dad or your brother, or, they're starting to need these things, like planning needs to be going on a lot sooner than, hey, we need an assisted living. How am I going to get the money to pay for this? Because then we're like, ooh, okay, well, that's not so easy to do. But they're great, assisted livings. You could have, it's like any place. You could have a great staff there. You could have a great shift there. I think in any situation, you have to kind of weigh the pros and cons. We'll kind of get into this, then I'll keep on going because I know I'll ramble on too much. Memory care. This is huge if you have someone with Alzheimer's or another related dementia. no one wants to put their loved one in a facility without them. But sometimes it comes to a point where, as a caregiver, you've given everything you could give. Like, you can't bring in outside sources. You can't keep them in. And this is a safe place to where you could have a loved one. And it's a scary proposition, but, these places are supposed to be trained and certified in this kind of care. And I've seen a lot of wonderful situations where, it really is the best option for the person. And I'm not going to go into Alzheimer's and dementia now, because that's a whole nother subject. Skilled nursing facility, that's where long-term care Medicaid does seem to kick in, but that's kind of like almost like end of life thing, or you're sitting in the bed the whole time. Everybody, they have that traditional kind of bias towards any kind of older adult living facility, because they think of nursing homes, or SNFs, as they call them in the business. But they could be a great source for you as well. If you had a loved one who couldn't stay in the home and they needed medical care, like, that's something that sometimes a person can't give them. Like, as a spouse, you can't provide that kind of medical care that they need. So that's another option. And then the last one I had on here is the continuing care retirement communities. And, they're kind of like a one-stop shop. They have everything. They have the independent. They have the assisted living. They have the nursing home. They have the memory care. And it's great. The only thing about this one-stop shop is sometimes they cost a lot of money, and there's different variations of how they work. Sometimes you have to put a big lump sum down payment. Sometimes you could do a rental, by month. It goes up as you go in, but it really is a great thing. I know Nikki had a client who, lived in one of these places, and they were able to maintain their residence there their whole life. And it meant a lot that they got to kind of go through that and be in this place. So it's a great resource. The thing about all these, availability and admission I have on here, and I had a couple of extra things on here, but I think availability, and it fluctuates. Like here, it's sometimes hard to get into some of these assisted living and independent facilities. They have waiting lists. Say you need to get into assisted living, and your spouse or had maybe aggressive behaviors, and it was documented in a note somewhere by a doctor. There may be some bias towards you. So it's not so easy to just say, hey, we're going to move into assisted living, or I'm going to move into a CCRC. I'm going to live in independent, and they're going to live in the assisted, and I can see them, which that will work out great, but it doesn't always work out that way. A couple other things I talked about earlier, I read on here, is staffing. And this kind of has been like the new pandemic era thing about employment, whether it's probably for you, Ruth, for home care, anything. It's hard to have employees who stay, work, and think about it. When you have maybe your spouse or your parent in a place, you want the best person taking care of them. And when it's not the best person, that's tough. When the ratios are supposed to be 1 to every 8 person, or I don't know the exact ratios, 1 to every 12, whatever it is, and it's 1 to every 20, that's scary, because that means mom's sitting in the room and not getting taken care of. So there's a lot of things to think about. And, I'm getting close. So I have like 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah. Okay, good. I'm getting close. So what should I do now to help make the decision? And I really think, I've been talking all this time. It's really such an individualistic decision for each person. For each one of us here, we probably have our own way of how we want to age in place. For me, Nikki's going to sit me in my recliner, and she's going to have sports on, and I don't care if I can't walk anymore. That's where I want to stay until I die. I just want to be able to sit there. I'm not going to say what Nikki wants me to do because that would be, we go to a dark place here. So I'm not going to say that. But each person has it. Some people, they want to move to a place, they want to be spoiled. That's great. But you kind of have to decide what's best for you. So one of Nikki's clients had this quote here, and I love this. In life, my dear, it's better to plan for the what ifs than deal with the and I think that's great because a lot of us in this room, and maybe some of us experience on a personal level, most people are reactionary. They don't prepare. So when the crisis happens, that's when they kind of want to do something and put something in place. But what we hope to get out of this today is like, we want to plan and we want to be prepared. So these are some things, matching your housing choice with your lifestyle. I think that's great. Like I said earlier, you can't, if you're not a social person, then probably living in a big social facility or area, that's not going to be for you. That's not going to be what you want. Important to think about long-term care before the crisis happens. Accept that aging comes with changes. These changes are not a sign of weakness. I think this is huge. And when I talk to older adults, I try to be honest and straight up with them. Like, it's okay. It's a fact of life. It's biology that sometimes, you may not be as flexible. You may not see as good. There's things that we could do, but like, let's be realistic and let's try to have the best quality of life possible with what we have. And you could think about this and put these things in place. And then I have and include the people closest to you. And I'm going to get back to that here with the kind of, how to help make these decisions. So, well, I'll start. I'll go down to the bottom for adult children and friends. I think this is a huge thing, especially for older adults. They have older adults who maybe have already made a move or are staying in the home. They could get feedback. They could really, pick their brain of, hey, you moved to this place. How was it? Was it something that you liked? Do you enjoy it? But even more so adult children. And this is something that it's tough for a parent. And I don't know. I think a bunch of us are adult children in here. Parents still see us as these little kids who don't know nothing, who are a little snot-nosed, and they don't want to listen. I have a master's degree in gerontology. I help people all the time. It took my dad 6 years to kind of go over and create a power of attorney. I was like, Dad, you need to have a power of attorney. I need to know what's going on. But we have to get families to start talking to each other. Because ultimately, a lot of these adult children, what do they end up doing? They kind of come swooping in and providing the support for their parents. So they should kind of be in helping on, not making the decision, but just kind of be in the conversation. Like there's the have the conversation, Lower Lake Fear Life Care always talks about. It's great. Going back, we have Nikki Care Management. We had the Senior Choice Connections. You have companies that could help you kind of look at the pros and cons of what's best for you. They kind of assess your situation and say, hey, I think you can age in place in the home. Or, hey, if you really want to go to a assisted living, they could kind of help determine what's the best assisted living place for you. They could kind of do things like figure out what the staff ratios are. Is the food good? They could talk to the participants. Hey, do you like living here? They could do the dirty work for you. You could go to a place like the Senior Center or the Brunswick Senior Resources. A lot of my social workers or caseworkers, they're connected to a lot of the professional organizations that provide aging services. They kind of know what's good and bad. They have people call them and go, I hate this place, blah, 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 blah. Or they are the greatest organization ever. And for better or worse, we get this information and we try not to, say, hey, you need to use this one place over the other, but we want to provide options. So that's something, talking to your doctor, your primary care physician, your nurse. Some of the older adults who serve, they've been with their doctors forever. Some haven't. I've been with my doctor now for like 20 years. Hopefully, as when I'm in my 70s, and hopefully, I think he'll be in his 70s too. You know, we'll have a good understanding of where we're at, and they could give me honest feedback. My nurse now, who I've had, she is a big advocate of mine, and she's honest with me, and she'll tell me the truth. And you want to have those kind of that kind of feedback from people like that. And then I'm sure, the last thing I'm missing is we live in the day of the internet. There are so many resources out there on the internet, whether it's AARP, the National Institute of Health, USA Aging, USA.gov Aging. I mean, I could go on and on, but I could tell you when I first started and I was learning about how to evaluate independent and assisted facilities, I found so many templates of what questions to ask, you know, even down to the contract of what am I signing over? Like what, you know, how much am I paying? It says this, but where are the hidden fees? Because there could be hidden fees, you know, asking, you know, making sure if I'm working with a home care company, I'm setting myself up for success, you know, planning ahead of what I want out of it so they can find me the best person. You know, there's a lot of resources out on the internet. So that's about all I got. I'll leave you with this. I think, you know, with any kind of decision, you know, it's important to be prepared and plan your future. I call it being, you know, not preventative, preemptive, like a preemptive strike. You have to kind of make sure you're ahead of the game, because if you don't, then something's going to happen and you're not going to be ready. And then, you know, the last thing is just gather as much information you can, but make the best decision for you. And I would tell that whether it's your spouse, yourself, whether it's an adult parent, you know, ultimately, like I said, it's individualistic, and you have to make the best decision for you, not what your kids want, because kids always say, oh, mom should be in assisted living. Well, that's not necessarily what mom wants. Maybe what mom needs, but we don't know. You know, that's their choice. So I'm sure I left over a bunch. I have information on here. Any questions before I let you go and get back to your list?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Probably a multifaceted question.
Yeah.
What can you tell me about, oh my gosh, it just went right through my head. Place, down on Front Street, South Front, tall building.
Oh, like the Cape Fear Apartments and
If your apartments, but, it's a white building right on the corner of Castle and South Front.
Oh, Solomon Tower.
Solomon Towers, yeah.
And then the one downtown on Chestnut. And
Yeah, the Cape Fear Apartments, yeah.
why, with the demographics of the county changing to an older population, why can't the county address that housing need with some facility, since we've got so much money from the sale of the hospital?
Yeah. So I can't.
Repeat the question.
Oh, so Don was asking, you know, he was talking about some models. We have quite a bit of senior housing in the New Hanover County area. And he was talking about the Cape Fear Apartments and Solomon Towers downtown. There's a bunch of different places. And, you know, he asked, you know, because of the sale of the hospital, we have this pot of money, and why can't we use some of that to address senior housing? So, and just being transparent, you know, I have no say in how that funding goes. And they have dedicated $3 million in a year for the next 5 years for kind of workforce housing. For me, it doesn't really address senior housing. And believe me, I go to those meetings and I make sure that they know that there needs to be more affordable senior housing. But I think that's something that, you know, we don't have a lot of space in this area. And so we do have to take advantage of some of these already existing buildings. But it's hard because they aren't, you know, and this is not me necessarily knowing, just my opinion. They aren't money makers. You know, some of these are, you know, they're, they aren't like, you know, for example, a lot of older adults, they want to rent an apartment. But to a rent apartment, you have to have 3 times the cost of what the rent is. Most people, most older adults who are living off, especially a lot of women who are living off $1,300 of Social Security a month, they can't meet that requirement. So they can't rent that apartment. Some of these, even these places like Solomon Towers or Cape Fear Apartments, where they used to be like $500 to $600 a month, now they're getting up to $800 to $900 a month. And again, even that, which is way more affordable than $1,300 to $1,500, is a lot when you have to start picking medication over food or food over medication. But Don, to your point and to your question, I think that there needs to be an investment.
It has to be the political will.
Yeah, it has to be the political will. And one thing I always talk to my students about in my gerontology classes when I am at UNCW is, you know, the older adult population has a huge voting block. But, you know, you have people have different views, even at everybody, just because everybody's in the 70 to 90 range doesn't mean they all have the same opinions, you know. And so it just depends on, that political will. But I also think it depends on also people with discretionary income, organizations, corporations investing in our community. Because if you think about it, if you create not only those senior housing places, which they just approved one near Porter's Neck, but if you approve more of these and you have like this holistic approach, you could have more of a preventive measure. Because if we don't have a more preventative measure in the future, then our hospital is not going to be able to take it. Our services are running out. I mean, even our senior center, we do a lot of great stuff. We don't have the funding to maintain and to support all older adults. One of the things we just asked for is a new senior center in the northern part of the town. Hopefully the county approves that. Yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah. Any other questions? Sorry, I know I didn't really answer that. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Hopefully Chris Coudray and the leadership doesn't kill me after this meeting. Any other questions? Well, thank you for having me. I hope I answered some of your questions. Thank you.
I do know, Don, there was a study by the Senior Housing Authority completed not long ago. And today we have 45 million adults 65 and over. By 2035, in 12 years, that's going to be 79 million. So the baby boomers have never followed the rules. They're not going to start following the rules now. And I think they've made a lot of good changes with aging that they brought with them. And so it's exciting to see what else is going to be changing to meet that need, that growing need. And as a community, we need to address that need.
You had a response. Cher, who's tuned in, said, Don, please organize some realtors like yourself to address this with our commissioners and city council.
Okay, so Don has been given a charge by, what was the lady's name?
Cher
Cher Pridgeon gave Don a charge there to lead the way. Thank you again for coming tonight and participating online. Thank you, Andrew, for an excellent job. Thank you for the information that you shared. Please be sure to leave feedback forms for Andrew specifically and for the organization, the Cape Fear chapter, so we can make our programming better. Any feedback about what you would like to hear, topics you'd like to hear also. And if you're a first timer, a reminder to leave a card with us to join our email group. Our next meeting will be April the 11th here at the same location, and it will be Battle of the Bills. So excited to hear about Battle of the Bills, our financial impact on loved ones. So thank you and have a very nice evening.
Two that I've done.